Okay. Thank you so much for doing this interview, Dr. Giovanni. And I read some of your other interviews. So I want to start off a little bit differently. I want to just start with a word association. So I'll say a word, you tell me first thing that comes to you. Okay. All right. Tennessee.
Oh, I was born in Tennessee. I'm a Knoxvillian by birth. And as we know, Eastern Tennessee was the difference in the Civil War because Middle Tennessee, Nashville, went with the money. And, of course, Memphis, Western Tennessee, went with the South. And if it hadn't been for Knoxville and that area deciding that they were going to stay with the Union, we would have had a different outcome for the Civil War.
All right. Next word, poetry.
I write poetry, and I enjoy it, and I encourage other people to do it. I try to teach not poetry, but strength in your own voice. I try to teach my students that what's important is what you know and how you express it.
Okay. Mama.
I have one. My mother passed 10 years ago now. I am one. My son is 46, and I am a grandmother. So I've gone through the whole...
Okay. Yeah. All right. Gus.
Gus was my father, and he too has passed. He's been, I suppose now, almost 17 years. I can't pull the math up, but Gus was... My mother married him, and he was my father. Oh, he is my father. He still is.
Grandmother?
Emma Lou Vigna. I had a friend who recently was asking me about that. Emma Lou is my grandmother, and my great-grandmother was Cornelia.
Okay.
And Cornelia Watson was the mother of my grandfather, John Brown Watson, who was obviously named John Brown for the Revolutionary. And John Brown married Emma Lou, and they had 3 daughters, Yolanda, Cornelia, and Anne Elizabeth, and Agnes Marjorie. And Agnes is 94 years old. She's still with us. Actually, she's coming to visit me in 2 weeks, and I have to make some chitlins. So I bought the chitlins. I'm going to have to clean them and put them on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad was a friend. I haven't seen him lately. Both of us are getting old. Ali is maybe 2 years older than I am. But when the government stripped him of his title, he, of course, did poetry. And Richard Fulton, who did some speaking handling for Ali, asked me, because a lot of people were afraid of getting associated with Ali, who was a good-looking, sweet guy. And he asked me, would I do it? Would I read poetry with him? Would I travel with him? And I said yes. But, Ali was a womanizer. And he was. And his wife was very nervous, but she knew me, and she said, well, I don't mind if it's Nikki. But what she didn't know, and I don't mind saying it now, is that I never was on the bus. He was on a bus. Okay. And he would travel like to Columbus, to St. Louis. He did the bus. I always flew because I was busy. And so whoever was on the bus with him is what was going on. Had nothing to do with me, but I laughed about that. If I could see him now, we would laugh about that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Jazz.
I love jazz. My mother was a jazz fan and a good singer. And my sister could play the piano. I don't have any talents like that, but I love jazz. And coming down here, I don't have it on now, but I put my ears on anytime I'm flying. I put my ears on, and I listen to them. I have what are those things? iPod. and I just listen all the way, fall asleep and wake back up, Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Black.
I am. And it's a term, it'd be very seldom that you would hear me use the term African American. The term that I traditionally use is, of course, Black Americans, because we are Americans and we are Black. And we are the people, and I will speak about that this evening. Black Americans are the people who had to create themselves. So when we came to America, we had to make a decision. Are we going to be Americans or not? We are, and then, of course, color is going to come in. If we look at our fellow Americans, we look at German Americans, at British Americans, now we look at Caribbean Americans, and now actually we're looking at African who have become here. But we didn't have any place to go back to. When we were brought here in slavery, but nonetheless, when we were brought here, we knew that we had no place to go. So whatever we were going to be, we had to create ourselves here.
Okay. 2 more. Middle Passage.
Middle Passage is the most incredible historical situation, as you know, and that is something that I talk about a lot, because the fact that we could come from enslavement to what was going to be, as it wasn't at that point, America, and come with a sanity, learn a language, create a food, create a music, create a people. Where would we be without Black Americans? It's an incredible. And Middle Passage is what I've been working with NASA.
Yes.
And I'm so excited about that because I really, really want NASA to send more Black people into space. And I want Black youngsters, not just, and I like scientists, it's not that, but we need the creative people to go into space. And we need to put the energy into getting the kids just to go up to the space station and come back. You know, they're in good shape, go up and come back and see what it is that they see. I was disappointed, for example, in The Martian, because I thought of all of the things for a movie, and I think that they should remake it. What we need on Mars is a Black woman. And I was laughing yesterday, we need a Black woman with some grits, because, or maybe a yam. But we need a Black woman because to have a white man up there who's going to grow potatoes is illogical.
And that was my last word associated, outer space.
Oh, I'm a big fan, and I think that it's so important that we get youngsters. We really have to get the inner city youngsters, and if I made the Appalachian youngsters involved. The Appalachian whites are involved. If you look at who were our first astronauts, they're all Appalachians. But we need to get our Black kids involved so that we can begin to envision space as where we are and how we create ourselves and how we get along with. So we know that we need Black women to be a part of space because they get along with and find a way to love everything, because we find a way to love people here in America.
That's so good. I want to go back a little bit, because I'm a PhD student in the English department here. And so the first time I really intensely read your work was in a graduate seminar on Black women writers. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the Black Woman Anthology project that came out in the 70s, which you contributed 3 pieces to. How did you get involved in that particular anthology?
Is that the one with Toni Cade?
Yes.
Okay. Of course, I knew Toni, and she lived in the village. I lived in uptown. I lived on 94th Street. So, but everybody knew everybody because there were few enough of us. And she invited me to be a part of it, which I was very glad. And Toni, I think, was teaching, if I'm not mistaken, at that time in Rutgers.
Okay.
But Toni didn't drive. I don't know if right now I couldn't tell you if she didn't know how to drive, or I really don't know what, but I had a Volkswagen, so I would go and pick her up and take her down. And so I started teaching the class because I was going down there, and she was working on that, and I got involved that way, and just, one thing leads to another.
Okay. In that particular anthology, you wrote a poem called Woman Poem, and you have a line where you say about Black women, you're either a sexual object, and you say, and no sex if you're fat. Black woman, get back, be a mother, grandmother, something, but not a woman. Yeah. What inspired that particular line and that particular perspective?
That's just history. You start to look at the image of Black women, and you looked at, and she was a friend. You look at a friend of mine, Lena Horne, and of course Lena's going to be a beautiful woman. Everybody's going to deal with that. But if you looked at Hattie McDaniel, she was going to be in Hattie McDaniel, if I'm not mistaken, won the first Oscar, and she was going to be an object, but she wasn't going to be a full human being. Nobody could see Hattie McDaniel falling in love. They saw her as, Mammy, and I was responding to those images of us.
Okay. One of my favorite pieces that you wrote from that anthology was that I fell off the roof one day. A view from the Black. Why do you laugh?
Because I remember that sort of.
You remember that sort of. You had a lot of interesting lines in there, but you were really talking about this kind of decentering of the university, right? And the Black university already exists. Any space that Black people come together and teach and learn. Do you see any of that being manifest today?
I don't know if I can really answer that.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and study my own writing to do that. What I have liked about my writing, though, you didn't ask me that, but what I have liked about it is that whatever I'm writing it today. And I'm not writing it for tomorrow. I'm not writing for next year. I'm not writing it because I want to win a prize.
Right.
And I try to say that to my students, too. I'm writing it because this is the way I feel as I'm trying to deal with the history, with what I know. And I'm trying to get it down. And I do. I have a sense of humor. So you...
Yes, you do. You do.
you get a lot of that. Yep, I do.
And I ask you that because I've seen other places where you've called yourself a futurist, where you've talked about space and looking forward.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you that. You also talked a lot about, in other interviews, your mother. You said that we get poetry through our mothers. And what are the ways that your mom or your grandmother or other female members have inspired your work?
I think you pay attention to them. You see what they're doing. And I've been very lucky because I cooked, of course. I learned to cook with my grandmother, but I cooked with Mommy. And I made beans the other day because it's cold. And I just had this thing. I wanted some northern beans and some jowl bacon, And it was so good. And I said to a friend, but it wasn't my mother's beans. And it really, I cannot make my mother's beans because I don't smoke. And I think that a part of what she did, she would do, and then so there must have been something about smoke. And there was something that she did. But I cooked with a lot of my friends, including Maya.
Okay.
And Maya and I used to laugh because Maya thought Maya was a good cook. I was going to say she thought she was a good cook. But she was a good cook. But I thought I made better lamb. I made a rack of lamb. I thought my lamb was better. And Maya thought hers was better. We had this argument. And I used to cook with Edna Lewis, who was also a great chef. So knowing those people and watching how they do things, you're watching poetry. And you enjoy. I enjoyed. I was just very lucky to know the people that I've known, and had a lot to do with my age. And had a lot to do with the fact that when you meet people and you like them, you continue relationships.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said about sending Black women into space. Because I've seen other places where you said that you feel like that you are the excellent representation.
I would have been.
Yeah. What makes Nikki Giovanni the representative from Earth to the extraterrestrials out there in the world? Well,
first of all, I don't want anything. And I think that's incredibly important because Earth, and especially right now, you look at the fools that we have. You look at Donald Trump and, the fools.
The fools,
and,
yes.
They want things, but I don't want anything. I'm interested in people. So if I'm on Mars, I'm going to find out who are you and what do you do, and let's take some grit. I have grits on Earth. What do you? I think that I get along with people. The reason that I can't go into space, and I've said that to some high school students I was talking to recently, is that I grew up in a generation that smoked. We are the generation of segregation, but we also smoked. And I had a lung cancer, and my left lung was removed, and I'm fortunate to be alive. But I cannot, it's just Dr. Bolden, I can go into space, and I had lunch with him, and he said, Dr. Giovanni, we can send you into space, but we can't bring you back. And you can't bring me back because coming back into gravity, your organs move around. And if my stomach, for example, would move, or my liver would move into that, it would kill me. So I said, let's make a deal. Because I'm 72 years old. I'm not going to live forever. People in my mother's family, live probably into their 90s or so. I have an aunt Agnes is 94. I said, when I get into my, late 80s, why don't you let me go into space? Because I'm not going to live much longer anyway. And when I die, you just open the hatch and just let me out. And then the kids can look on Earth and say, oh, there goes
Nikki Giovanni.
Yeah, there goes Nikki.
And I've heard you talk about this in other art interviews and articles, right? You don't have a fear of death. Yeah. That's not something that scares you, which is interesting because of the friends that you've had, the friends that you lost. So what in you gives you that fearlessness about death?
It's not a fearlessness, it's that you know that which is born to die. That's what's going to happen. I would rather not be shot. I would rather not be beaten to death. No, I don't want to be misunderstood here. But we know that at some point this comes to an end. And since we don't know when it comes to an end, what we have to do is be the best person we can be while we are here. And a part of that is loving people, a part of that is giving people, a part of that is calling fools like Donald Trump a fool, because he isn't a fascist, and somebody that needs to be defeated, you know,
Absolutely.
just absolutely. So you do today's job today, and when tomorrow, whichever side of the dirt you wake up on tomorrow, if you wake up on this side of the dirt, you do this job. If you wake up on the other side, then you begin to find out what it is. It'll just be another adventure.
Okay. So you talked about fools a couple times, and you brought up Donald Trump. So
I have to. It worries me because I used to, when I was a history major at Fisk.
Okay.
And Theodore Courier was my professor. And I never did understand how an Austrian, Hitler, with a stupid-looking mustache, could convince Germans to kill Jews whom they knew. And millions of people killed millions of people. I could do the history on it, but I could never understand it. And I have watched Donald Trump, who is, whatever, a billionaire with a stupid, funny looking, and I see people who are poor as Job's church mouse. People don't have teeth in their head, and they're standing there saying, Donald Trump speaks for me. And I had an insight into how fascism happens, because these people would follow him and do what he wants to do, and they would kill you and me, whom they know, who actually, if they think about it, we have more in common because we all need health care. We all need a minimum wage raise.
Absolutely.
A billionaire is not going to do that.
No, not at all.
But they're going to follow him. And so I had an insight into fascism. And I mentioned Trump because, one, I think he's dangerous. Everybody try to act like, oh, he's funny. There's nothing funny about him.
Not at all.
He's a dangerous man. And the people who follow him are dangerous people. These are the people that used to lynch us in Mississippi. These are the people that shot down King and Malcolm.
Absolutely.
These are the people that arrested Rap Brown. And I must say I'm very, very disappointed in our president that Barack Obama has not given a presidential pardon to Rap, because he knows very well that Rap didn't do anything, he shouldn't be in prison. And it's my understanding that Rap is ill now and should be out. But it's things like that worry you. And I have to mention it because maybe 2 people listen to me. Nobody listens to poets. But for the 2 that do, I just want to say Trump is a fool and needs to be defeated.
Definitely. And you talked about having that insight into fascism. But what do you think it is in people, right, who completely look past that class and say, this is the person that speaks for me? What do you think is making it resonate with them?
I really wish I knew. I think that some poor people, black and white, but no black people can be, well, not no, because I've seen a couple of people, but poor white people think it's more important to be white than it is to recognize that they're poor. It's the same people that fought. For example, we're here in Gainesville. It's the same people that fought for the Confederacy.
Absolutely.
They had nothing to gain by the freedom of the slaves. But these are the same people that say things like, I don't want to see the Muslims coming here. I don't want to see the Hispanics. And Trump is really too funny. Trump is saying we're going to build a wall to keep the Mexicans out. That's not what you have to do, because the figures say you have to build a wall to keep the Mexicans in. Most of them are leaving. They're not going to be bothered because they can't get anything done here. And you look at what has built this nation. And I don't know where he gets the again from.
Right.
I do not know. No, we're not great yet. And what we need to do is be working together to see if we can't come to a greatness. But I just think that it has to be responded to. I don't understand. I don't understand.
You said no one listens to poets. But people listen to you.
No.
They do. Even though you sometimes let it be known that you're not a guru, you don't have the answers to these questions. But I want to know, what inspires you now? What's happening in the world that gets Nikki Giovanni's attention?
Oh, a lot. First of all, I like this younger generation, and they are the post-segregation generation. So how they're responding to freedom has been interesting to me, because there was a time right here at the university that we as black Americans would have been delighted. We fought to be able to attend the university. And now the kids are upset because some of the white kids are mistreating them. And I think that one of the things that this generation has to learn is that when we say white, we don't mean each and every. You have to distinguish between those fools and those good people. And it's very important because it's easy to lose track. And you have to recognize that there's some of everything you don't like. There's always somebody you don't like. And we have to find our friends, and we have to distinguish between that and the people that would be enemies, that would be negative about us.
What are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement?
I think it's wonderful. I was just in Chicago.
Okay.
And when I heard about it, the first thing I did, I don't do the internet. And I don't.
Nikki, we got to get you on Twitter.
No, none of that. It makes you crazy. But none of it. But I was laughing with Faye Williams, who does Sister Space. I have people, and I'm very fortunate I have people. So I said to my people, I want a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And so they got on the internet and they got me one. I think that this is an important movement. And I think that what they were doing in Chicago, I think that what they were doing in San Francisco, I think that bringing the attention that you just can't keep shooting our youngsters down like this. And we're not going to do anything about it. I think it's very important, and I think it's very good. I don't know how this is going to come up against let's boycott the Oscars. I'm not seeing that this is the same level of importance, but I can learn. Well, the Oscars just a little statue, and I think to say that we want more blacks in the Academy makes sense because we want more blacks to do a lot of things. But Black Lives Matter is a grassroots movement, and I think what they're doing is wonderful.
Good. And you've talked a lot about, you mentioned in another interview about how we celebrate Martin Luther King Day. So you've been a big proponent of Rosa Parks Day.
Yeah.
And why we need to celebrate her. So can you talk about that investment in her and what she represents? Because I know she was a friend to you.
She was a friend.
Also.
Rosa was a friend, and it's not that I want to take Martin.
No.
I was just saying let's not forget. And we are going to have a woman on the $20 bill, and so I've been a big fan, and nobody listens to me, but I would love to have Rosa Parks on the $20 bill. I just think it would make me work hard to get $20.
It would.
Yes, it would.
Can you tell us more about her personality and the time you spent with her? I think so much about her is relegated to that day on the bus, when in the last couple of years we know she had a very robust life and activism in the community. So what was your relationship with her?
You have to remember that Mrs. Parks lived next door to A.D. Nixon, who was the head and she also was in the NAACP. And we have to recall that there was a rape in Alabama that she was sent up to investigate. Mrs. Parks was always involved. And so when people say she was just a tired old lady, they just don't know what they were talking about. I happen to have just been privileged to have known Ms. Parks, and she's wonderful. Nothing ever phased her. She was always very, very calm. No matter what was going on, she was not ever going to get upset about anything. And I thought that was, I wish I was more like that, just very, very much
You get upset?
into it. I'm afraid I do. But she was just well within herself. And of course, mentally, she was always very strong. She always knew what she wanted to do. Probably one of the smartest things that she did, she and Raymond did, was to finally leave Montgomery because somebody would have killed her. And I thought it was really a good idea to move on. And John Connors was right to make sure to hire them, to make sure that they could earn a living. And of course, we wouldn't have Martin without Mrs. Parks, absolutely. And I think one of the people overlooked, and again, this is just history, is A.D. Nixon. Mr. Nixon was a strong, great man. And of course, Martin used to say, well, he doesn't speak well, which he probably didn't. I mean, very few people spoke as well as Martin. But A.D. knew what he wanted done.
Okay.
And he was a good leader of the NAACP.
Okay. I know you're a big fan of this generation and the hip hop generation. So I want to know, are there any particular artists that you listen to, hip hop artists now? I know you're a big fan of Tupac.
Yeah, I am. I have a Thug Life tattoo.
The OG.
That's right. But no, I'm actually a jazz fan.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm 20 years old anymore.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to deal with any of that, you know. I'm a big Serena Williams fan because I've been a tennis fan. My mother played tennis and I did. Yes. And Serena was dating Drake. Yeah. And
you were fond of that?
It had nothing to do with me. But I have a box. My attorney and I have a box of tennis in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And Serena's box is crossed. So we can look there and see Drake. And I was like, oh, that's Drake. You know, keep up with it. But no, I wish the kids well. You know, I was just incredibly sad because Venus lost yesterday at the Australian Open. And I'm a real Venus fan because she has conducted her life so beautifully, just so beautifully. And I'm sorry she lost, but I would go see Venus any place. And I hope she comes. Yeah, I hope she comes to Cincinnati. She usually does. And you know, she's had an illness, and we all have. She's a lot younger than I am, but we all have these things. And I was just sorry that you know, she lost. But if I ever get any money, which is not likely, I was laughing. I'm gonna tell the group too. I played the lottery, which I never do.
Did you?
Well, it's $1.5 billion. Why wouldn't you win?
Why wouldn't you, right?
And I was very sorry to wake up the next morning and find out I didn't win it. Because a friend of mine said, well, what are you going to do if you win the lottery? I said, well, the first thing I'm going to do, and that's the truth. I know other people say they're going to do good things for other people. First thing I was going to do is go to Australia. And I was going to watch the Australian Open. Because I've always wanted to see the Australian Open. And it'll take something like the lottery for me to do that, but maybe if I start putting, you know, $100 down, you know, I'll work on it in a couple of years. I'll be able to do that. You know?
I get you. One thing that I'm just noticing, just from the brief time talking to you, is just, you know, your admiration of Black women across the board. And I want to know, there's, you know, a little phrase going around now, social media phrase to describe Black women called Black girl magic.
So what?
Black girl magic. So when Black women are doing good things, or when Black women are excelling, we say it's Black girl magic. What do you think about a phrase
like that?
You like that?
Sure, because when you ask about Middle Passage, but the one thing again that when we look at Middle Passage, we know that these people didn't speak the same language because they were from different. And we know as they're coming across, they had to find a way to talk, and it had to be a Black woman that just started a song. It was a song, and that had to be a Black woman that's going to bring that song to give us the way to talk. I'm a big fan of Black women. I mean, how could you not be?
I ask myself that.
Yeah. How could you not be?
You had a line that in one of your poems where you said, I really hope that no white person ever has cause to write about me because they never understand that Black love is Black wealth.
And they'll probably talk about my hard childhood and never understand that all the time I was quite happy. It's called Nikki Giovanni. It was the first poem that I wrote that got any kind of attention. I wouldn't have thought that when I wrote it, but I was pleased that it did. Because you're the one that has to define your life. That's all I'm saying. You really do. You can look at what's going on, but you can't let other people say who you are or what it means to you. Yeah.
And so how do you feel like we can continue, and I know you don't like this kind of questions, but how do you feel like we can continue to cultivate that Black love? Because I think sometimes it's difficult, right, in a world where Black people are being killed so gratuitously, right, to keep cultivating.
You know, a part of this, though, really, and again, I'd have to do numbers, and I'm not prepared to do that. But Black people were being killed a lot in the 20s. Black people were being killed in slavery. And we're upset more now because we have the internet that shows us who. So Freddie Gray got killed. Everybody knows that. Sandra Brand got killed. Everybody knows that. We had people hanging from trees. We had people, the cops shot down. We had people being beat to death. And so it's not an unusual. And I don't mean it's normal, I just mean it's not unusual. And what we cannot do is we cannot let people who dislike us define who we are and how we respond to things, which is why, again, I am incredibly proud of, though I had nothing to do with it, Black Lives Matter, because the women put that together, and they said, we're going to make a statement. But it's something that, I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta, and the Deltas marched during the era of segregation. We marched with the women for the right for women to vote. And when, you keep seeing that people have made these statements, and that we have defined who we are and how we embrace who we are. So finding Black love is Black wealth is just a question of not looking at too much TV or being careful about looking at your Facebook or something, because they tell you that you're nothing. And it's one of the reasons that I don't do any of that stuff. Because you start to argue, then it's how many likes do I have? Oh, I only had 20 likes or whatever, and it'll make you crazy. And what you have to do is make a decision. This is my life, and this is how I feel about it.
So what's next for Nikki Giovanni? What's the next project? What's the next poem? What's coming next?
Well, I'm hoping my next project is I am having lunch in a month with Dr. Bolden again. And I want NASA to send some kids into to Antarctica. I think that's very important. And I've been to Antarctica, so I'm not asking for myself, but I want them to go so that they can be prepared to go into space. And my latest book, which won't be out until probably October, at the rate I'm going, it's called A Good Cry. And it's because it took all of these years, but I don't cry easily. And one of the things that I finally realized is that women don't cry easily. Things happen, and we say, oh, I need to go and get it done. I need to get it done. So my mother died on June 24th, and my sister died on August 10th, and my aunt died on the 29th of October. And so I had to bury people. So I didn't get to do what I'm doing now. I didn't get to cry. And my dog died on the 10th of December, by the way. And I think that I want to explore what it means to learn to cry and to let ourselves cry. Because the minute that you cry, everybody, oh, don't cry, it'll be all right. But somebody needs to say, crying makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. If you don't cry when you're sad, we do sometimes tears run out when we're happy because we're laughing. But if you don't cry when you're grieving, when do you cry? So I'm exploring that.
Do you feel like Black women especially have been told not to cry or have a special difficulty?
I didn't do race or religion on that. As I looked at women, I think that women hold a lot in. And despite what Hollywood says, I think that we don't let our emotion out. We go on and do what has to be done. And I think that we need to learn to crying is a skill, and we need to learn it.
I want to ask you a little bit about your relationship with Toni Morrison.
Oh, Toni's a friend. Yeah, she's always been a friend. And I met Toni when I read The Bluest Eye. I lived on 94th Street. She was working at Random House, which is all the way downtown. And I didn't have a car then. And I never did. I don't think I've ever been on New York subway. I just don't have a remembrance of it. But I said, when I read the book, I was like, oh, I'm going to meet this woman. Because
what was it about The Bluest Eye that?
Oh, it was an incredible book, just an incredible book. And I walked all the way down, which is like 50 miles, and went to Random House. I didn't know if Toni knew who I was or anything like that. And, they had the guards and stuff. And I said, Nikki Giovanni, I want to see Toni Morrison. And so she came down and I said, I just had to tell you that's the most brilliant book. And I wasn't drinking then. I drink wine now. But I wasn't then. And we went and had a cup of coffee. And we've been friends ever since. Toni's a good friend, yeah.
I know that in your interview with Taylor Smiley, you all were chuckling when she had that quote that whatever it is you say about Negroes, they've never bored me. So you're laughing again.
Yeah. But she's a friend, so there's not anything else tonight. We don't cook together. Toni's not a cooker. I'm sure she does, but we don't cook together. But she does and I've been looking for her because I want to go up and see her for another reason, but she likes porgies.
Okay.
And I know that I can get porgies in Cincinnati, but I can't drive right now. And there's a place in Cincinnati where the fish are actually swimming. So you can go and, something dies so something can live, which is what Toni says all the time. So I'm going to go get some porgies, and I'm going to go up and fry them for her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, those are all the questions that I had. This was a beautiful interview.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
For doing this.
My pleasure.
All right.
Okay.